Hello again, this is Fiendish with Dimension Touring, and we're going to start our big segment on copy and paste with rotating. Now, rotating doesn't really have anything to do with copy and paste, but if you don't understand how the rotate function works, then setting a rotational offset is not going to be very easy. So, I'm in Castle Fortune. You may have noticed on the other guides I was in Anywhere. This particular cottage frame was a toolbox set, and it was done in wood. I took it to Anywhere, I reworked it a little bit, and now I want to move it here to Castle Fortune. Unfortunately, the coordinates for one dimension are not going to be the same in another dimension, so using the loaded original location function of the save set is not going to work. So what happens is my frame is way high, I can't get it on the floor, and it's butting directly into this wall. So I need to turn it. And I'm going to keep this set open because I want it to face this little opening here. So I want it to go basically 180 degrees. Now, one thing about Castle Fortune is it's about 30 degrees off of axis, which means that the way I'm looking, the arrows don't line up with that. They're going to be off. And this one is a really rough dimension to use for that because there's all this existing architecture to try to line up off of. So you can either cover up all that architecture or rotate and make things match. So let's see what happens when I try to turn 180 in absolute. Now, absolute means that each and every piece is going to turn 180 degrees. Here we go. Okay, so that's what happens there. So we're going to pull it and just reload it. Now, one thing with rotating while this loads is a lot of people have problems with it, and it's not anything that should really be hard or stressful, because all rotations, the biggest number you can have is 360, because that's how many degrees are in a circle. I like to think of circles as a pie, and my degrees of rotation are a slice of that pie. And so everything that you want to do, it should all equal 360 in the end. Like if I want to turn it 180, then I'm just going to turn it in the opposite direction. If I want to turn it 90, then I'm turning it, say I'm facing this way, then I'm just going to turn sideways. And if I want to turn 90 the other way, then it, you know, it's going with the arrows. It's either going to be a plus or a minus 90. Now, 168 pieces for this set would actually be a little bit bigger than Toolbox could handle. I never liked going more than 100 items with Toolbox, just because it might have problems. But with DT, and this is 1 and 2, don't have any issues loading big sets like this. And this is not even a really large set to load. The biggest set I've loaded so far has been 200 items with the new version of Dimension Tools, and it took it okay. So now we know that absolute rotation doesn't work for groups, but one thing that DT 2.0 did add was now you can rotate in a group. The trick is to click the relative and then make sure as group is selected and then rotate it. Now what it did, and I'm going to set it down because it's not too big for my default client, so I can move it into position. So now I can go inside. But anyways, what it did was it set this pivot point right here where all these arrows come together. So it pivoted the entire set around that point, which is exactly what you would want from a group rotation. And it was that easy. So, but let's try something maybe a little bit simpler now. And use this. Okay, we'll scale it a little bit bigger. Okay, say I want to make a conical shape. Well, I can rotate from this point here, or I can flip it mostly upside down so that that arrow is at the top. If I want to make a conical shape, I want the wider piece at the bottom. Now I don't want it that far. I'll just rotate it about 30 degrees, so 150. How did I come up with 150? Because upside down would be 180 minus 30 from that. That's 150. So now we can go into copy and paste, use new items, get some flicker reduction. I want to copy this. And this is where my rotational offsets come in, over here in the middle column of the copy and paste items window. I'm going to copy this. I want to offset multiple items. How many items? Well, we won't know that until we set the rotation. Now with the poles being like this, you want to set a rotation that's small so that there's not a big gap at the bottom. So we'll try 8 degrees. Now 8 goes into 360 45 times. I'm going to copy. I'm going to remove this pole because the last pole is going to go in that position as I've selected 45, so that means it will make the full circle. And paste. I could probably widen out this rotation to 9 degrees and maybe save a few items, but 9 is one of those numbers that does not evenly go into 36 or 360. Well, actually, yes it does. It goes in 40 times. But I like 8. And there it is. Now if you ever want to make a conical roof with poles or corner posts, it actually works the same way. It is that easy as setting an offset, hitting copy, and then hitting paste. Now if I want it to be upside down so that the arrow is back at, so that the point is back at the bottom, all I have to do is check relative and as group and then rotate. Now I've got a fancy vase that uses a lot of items, or you know, whatever kind of design that I want to make up, maybe a round bathtub, you know, anything. You can use it to make whatever you want. Now let's talk a bit about things like poles and corner posts. A lot of times, I'll set a plank here so we have a reference point too. Now a lot of times when you're setting rotations, you have to factor in where do the arrows meet. Usually just for sake of ease, I call it the center point. In planks, it's pretty much in the center. But on corner posts and poles, it's at the bottom, which makes these a lot easier to work with because now I don't have to offset for these planks. So we're going to use this. I want to rotate it just 90. Now I don't want to leave it in relative because that moved it 90 degrees from where it was at. I want to make it an absolute rotate. There we go. I'm not going to use 45. I'm going to use about 20. Now for stairs. A lot of people ask me, how do I make spiral stairs? Well, if you're using corner posts and poles, it is really easy. Almost, you know, pretty much as easy as making that cone. Now if I go 8, it's going to go that way. So I want to go -8 so that it curves this way. I'm not doing, and I'm going to hit copy. I'm going to leave this here because I'm not making a circle. I'm making stairs. So I'm going to leave it there. Make sure I got 21 posts, yep. And then I'm going to hit paste. And now just like that, I've got some stairs. The only thing is 8 is about it's too big of a rotation. So we'll go 6, pull these up, and then hit paste again. Because all I'm doing is changing the offset. I'm not changing anything about this piece right here, so the copy still applies. And there we go. Now with 0.25, that's about the maximum you want to go with a squared edge for steps, because outside of that, you already see I'm getting caught and bouncing. Any more than that, and then I'll start to catch, and then I'll have to jump to get to the top. So now we've used a rotational offset with copy and paste. We've used a distance offset just off of eyeballing, and we've done absolute and relative group rotations. Here we are back in Anywhere, and I've got this foundation going here. I did not do a rotational offset with this copy and paste. I just did a hard rotate. If I reset it, it goes flat. If I rotate it 90 in the pitch and absolute, now it's standing upright. Now this one here is actually rotated on 2 axes because of the brick pattern. If I say want to reset it and just rotate it in the row, which would put it the right way, have it rotating in the right direction rather, now you see my brick pattern is vertical while the rest of the brick patterns are horizontal. So the easy fix for that, and since it's a tile, then it's square, is just to rotate in 2 axes. Now building with an add-on, just to clear up any misconception, does not mean that I'm never ever touching a piece. There we go. Now I've got the second one. And how did I get that distance? We'll talk about that coming up with the distance calculator, or the offset calculator, because it all comes down to the scaling and how far apart things are. And that is just using it to rotate like this is absolutely the most basic function of rotate. So you may notice if you watch the other videos that the dome is gone. We're going to make that again real quick. And I actually probably could use custom pivot to make it, but I made it by hand. Well, pretty close to by hand the first time, so we're just going to keep doing that. So that's a set that I've created of each rib piece, but how did I get to that point? I'm going to use Control D. I want to reset the rotation. Now, the basis for this dome is the Roman Pantheon, which is a round building attached to some square entry points. And one of the features of that dome is a big hole in the middle. So I could use, I could spin out some necropolis arches, or I could use a Bravanic dome, but neither one of those would work right. And with the arches, now I've got to worry about hiding the pieces that are at the bottom. And this principle works the same regardless of where it is. So if you want to make bridges or arched paths or whatever, or even a really large arch, now you've got it. So I need a foundation, and I don't want it set flat, because if I set it flat, then the arc of this arch is going to be very tall. So I want to rotate it, not 30. I'm going to set the first one in an absolute rotate, and I want 40. Now this is a really gentle curve, so when I do my copy and paste, still in the roll, going minus the arrows, I'm going this way, so we're going to rotate -5, and copy and paste. It would help if I did it in the right axis. There we go, that's better. And so all I have to do is do this all the way across. Just copy and paste. Manually moving everything in. Now, of course, when you make round things like this and you're doing it this way, you can set your rotation however you want to. For arches, I used to like 15 degrees because that presents a nice outer rounded edge. Anymore, to save on a little bit of item count, I usually use a 20 degree. So for things like a 180 arch, you know, it starts at 0 and ends at 180, then it's only about 10 items. And there it is, it's done. Mostly by hand. I'm starting at plus 40 and ending at minus 40. Now you see that this still doesn't look like that piece there. What I want to do is I want to take out the one that's flat. The flicker reduction gives it that 0.0003 offset. So we're going to pull it out. And then I'm going to select all of these pieces here. And this works in the same if you want to make any kind of pointed arch. Then I'm going to butt those up even, and now to account for the hole, I'm going to pull those out, and there we go. So now I just want to select all of these and save them as a set, which I've already done. And then to recreate the dome, I don't need this anymore. Just in case you thought that making something like this was really, really hard, it's not. Load it. Now, since I made it here, I'm going to load at the original location. Unless, well, we'll get to multiple copies when we get to loading and saving sets. Wow. What happened today? So with each one, I want to dome rib, use new items, load at the original location, load. And then with relative and as group, I want to rotate it 8 degrees. Because what we want is to minimize any gaps or overlaps at this edge. Sadly, with making square things into round things, you're going to have a lot of overlap up here at the top. But what you want is not too much down here at the bottom, because I don't really care how people see it from the outside. What I care is how people see it from the inside, and from the inside I want it smooth as possible. Given current item limits, I don't think that I'll be able to recreate the whole dome of the Pantheon with all the insets and inlays, but from here, anyone going in should be able to see a smooth surface. And now I'm not going to use wood cubes in the final count. This is just to get an idea of how many pieces I'm going to need, because I'm starting with 395 cubes, and I'll estimate that I'll probably use most of them, because even with this inner circle removed, it was 276. Now once it's done, I can just go through and pick out any excess that doesn't too much damage the interior. So rotating, just like anything else, whether it's scale or movement or anything, is as hard as you want to make it. You can do easy, you can do hard, and as you can see now I'm going -8. That's because I'm not adding 2. I could take this and I could step up my, and I screwed that one up. I could take this and I could add to my rotation as in 8, 16, 24, 32, and then do it that way. But I would rather count, and I do it one rib at a time. because just in case I do things like I did on that last rib, I mess it up, I'm not having to pull the whole thing and start from scratch. It's just that one rib, and all I have to do is reload it and move it. So now you've got the idea of copy and paste using a rotational offset, the differences between absolute and relative rotation, and the importance of making sure that as group is selected. So next time we'll be getting into copy and paste through offsets on distance and the offset calculator. Until then, happy building!